will call to order the meeting of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for Monday, January 28th, 2019. The first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions to the agenda?
Move approval. Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Next thing is the approval of the minutes. We're approving the minutes for January 14th, 2019. Any changes or additions to the minutes?
Move adoption, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And we've adopted the minutes. Next, we're on to employee recognition. General Manager Koister.
Sure. My understanding is that we do this is that we have an employee recognition, which I'm very proud of, and Mark Humphreys will give us a little bit of information about why the recognition is being given, and we'll move from there.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, council members, I'd like to present James Peach. James Peach is one of our fine blue line operators. A little background before I tell you what I actually did. When he was 4 months old, he was in a fire. He was saved by a firefighter. He was fired in CPR years ago. So 30 years later, he actually witnessed an NWA mechanic die of a heart attack. Again, made him want to take CPR and just have the skill set in case something ever may happen in the future. On September 19th of this last year, James was operating a northbound train at Cedar Riverside Station. He observed one of our customers having a seizure. So James responded like you would expect somebody that was trained and one of our fine employees. He responded and started performing CPR for this person to save lives. So again, James Peach. Yes, you do.
I get the good part. All right, next we are on to tab liaison report. Mr. Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, General Manager Koister, Director Thompson. My name is Peter Dugan. I am the tab liaison to this committee. Pleasure to meet you. Boy, what a big job. Anyway, we are blessed that we're going to have a great presentation at the end of the agenda for the Regional Solicitation funding decision, and I will not spend any time on that. But at the PCA, Laura Bishop has been appointed commissioner. She comes from Best Buy, where she has worked in corporate responsibility, sustainability, and public affairs. Joining the tab from the PCA will be Craig McDonald. He, as an assistant commissioner for air and climate policy, he comes from the Department of Agriculture, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, Director of Government Relations, and it's my understanding, and Director Thompson, correct me if I'm wrong, that this will be the first time that there's an air and climate policy assistant commissioner. On the executive committee, there were a couple of changes. Randy Maluchnik, the chair of the Scott County Board of Commissioners. Carver? Oh, that's right, Carver. That's right. Oh, John Oracle killed me. Anyway, is joining the executive committee. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dick Swanson, a council member from Blaine, will be joining the executive committee, Councilmember McCarthy's district. And also on changing guard on the tab, Jan Callison is becoming the alternate, and Debbie Gottel, who was the alternate, is becoming the full representative. Mayor Myron Bailey from Cottage Grove, it's Mr. Melander's district, and Mayor Mark Winchell from Chaska, again, Deb, your district, is joining the tab. There's just a couple of quick items of business. The first two are a program year extension and a program year change. Very similar, but different. In the area of Maryland Avenue and Edgerton Street, it's District 13, Mr. Kramer's district, there's been a request to delay the or extend the year in which it's supposed to be done. And what will happen, there were delays in designing a project based upon a pilot study that was brought about by a fatality in the Maryland Avenue area. And the staff and TAB voted to recommend, to approve an extension of the program year to 2020. And what that means, though, is that it doesn't guarantee there'll be federal money available, and the requester, the applicant, must complete the project and pay up front, hoping that they get reimbursed, which they will, but the reimbursement in this case would not be until 2024 when the federal money will be available. Brooklyn City and MnDOT, kind of on the other side of the coin, are requesting a program year change. And this, Madam Schreiber, this is in your district. This is the Highway 52 and 66th Street. The city is doing 2 projects, and then MnDOT received Corridors of Commerce funds to make 252 into a freeway. And at the same time, MnDOT is also working on the parallel corridor of I-35W North. So to prevent 2 major roadways being down at the same time, both the city and MnDOT requested a program year change. And what that means is they must wait until 2023 to do this. They will have to, because the project on I-35W doesn't finish until 2022. But where it's different from a program year extension, they get the funds approved for 2021. So when the year change, you get the funds, and the extension, you have to wait for them. And the last item from the tab is the, excuse me, MnDOT request that tab approve the solicitation criteria and the selected project for the HSIP, the Highway Safety Improvement Program. As you know from past, that is a program dedicated to reducing fatalities and serious injury. It is evaluated by, or the project selected and the methodology is evaluated by transportation experts. It's data-driven, and the funding for this will be 2022 and 2023. Typically, again, I'm sure as you know, the reactive projects, those that are coming because an accident or fatality occurred, tend to get 70%, where the proactive get 30% of the funding. In this cycle, which will be about 23 million, because of the number of proactive applications received, the reactive will have 56% and the proactive 44%. So it's a really big change. And no, I'm not going to. I have a list, if anyone would like, after the meeting, I have a list from Elaine Kasoukalis on the highlights of TAB, what they accomplished in 2018, but I will let that go. And Madam McCarthy, you just joined us, and I just wanted one, Dick Swanson has been appointed to the Executive Committee of the TAB, council member from Blaine, your district. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dugan. Any questions? Okay. If not, then we will move on to reports, and we'll start with Metropolitan's Transportation Services Director Thompson.
Madam Chair and members, since we're in the legislative session, I thought I'd give a few updates each session about some bills that are moving through or any changes or things that are happening up in the Capitol. I'll start first, though, with the federal shutdown. As you're aware, that has come to an end, hopefully for a long time, but we were able to manage through that through our reserves and trying to return to normal operations as much as we can with FTA reopening and other impacts on the council. But we'll continue to be prepared if there's another shutdown in the next few weeks. So we'll keep you abreast of that. But we were able to manage through that effectively. At the House last week, Chair Slawik, Judge Shetland, General Manager Kleistra, and myself, we gave a broad overview of transit and transportation planning to the House Finance Committee. This is one that really kind of gets in depth about each of our services, so the new members understand how our services work and some of the issues that they might come up before them. Thought it was a very good presentation and good question and answers about our various services that we have, and also what we're planning to do. So things that are documented in the TPP. Among bills that have been introduced so far that impact our operations, there's 2 that actually passed last year that were part of the larger bill that was vetoed that are again moving forward. That is expansion of metro mobility to the Lakeville in Lakeville area. And then also a data sharing with DHS that we've been pushing for, that is an outcome of the Metro Mobility Task Force that seems to have real good support, but got stuck in the veto last year. So those bills are again moving forward this year independently, hopefully, and we'll continue towards path towards passing. With the regards to the weather, a couple updates. We had planned a policymaker workshop on Wednesday on connected and automated vehicles with MnDOT. We have decided today to cancel that one because we do have one that is also likely to be rescheduled or scheduled again in March and April for policymakers. So in the best interest of travel, we decided to cancel that one. And in terms of our Metro Mobility operations, planning began as early as last Friday for looking at the weather. Operators have really stepped up their operations to ensure safe travel. Typically what happens though on this, all the Metmo customers that have non-essential trips tend to cancel those trips. So we're seeing quite a few cancellations, which is okay. That helps operations, but assure you that the customers will be safe and we'll make sure those buses are warm. And that concludes my report, Madam Chair, if there's any questions.
Any questions for Director Thompson? Okay, then we will move on to General Manager Cloister from Metro Transit.
And Madam Chair, members, today is my first official day in the position of General Manager, and I will assure you I understand it is a big job, and I want for people to know that I appreciate that it is a big job. I will also say that I couldn't have asked for more from staff and the senior leadership of Metro Transit in terms of how they welcomed me and worked to get me informed of their issues. I had the advantage of having worked with transit issues probably 75% of my time or more as regional administrator, so I'm familiar enough to perhaps to be dangerous. But I have a strong team of people, and I knew that coming into it, and they've proven that in the meetings that I've had, and I'm really it's really been a welcome experience, and I appreciate that a lot. And as all of you know, nothing in public service is done alone. It's always done with in partnership with many others, and I have a lot of good partners over at Metro Transit. We're talking about cold weather too, a lot, and a lot of preparations are being done so that we can do our part to look out for our customers. We are also trying to look out for our staff with respect to focusing on having them focus on projects when they typically work outside, work inside. Projects can be done inside, but also like any other mechanical thing, when bad weather comes, it actually brings probably greater need for maintenance and other sorts of issues to come up. So there's only so much we can do about that, and I've been told how strong a team we have, maintenance team we have, that goes out and does that work, and I'm going to say in advance how much that's appreciated to keep the lines running and keep it going. To minimize the customer exposure, we're encouraging them to use Next Trip, which provides them real-time departure. We hope people use common sense and stay in when they can stay in, and avoid even needing public transportation if they don't need public transportation, just because it's so dangerous outside for the same reasons that meetings have been canceled that Nick mentioned. Speaking of Next Trip, we are seeing a large increase in the use of Next Trip. There were more than 3.6 million Next Trip requests through text last year. That's a 75% increase over 2017. As you know, the use of this free service, customers simply text MT and their stop number to the number 27299. That was a commercial there for Next Trip. But it's working and people are using it, and there were more than 62 million Next Trip requests last year. So it's quite a success. Also, there's a new shelter was recently installed outside of the old Pioneer Press building, part of a continued effort to improve waiting facilities in downtown St. Paul. The shelter is located on 5th Street between Cedar and Wabasha. The busy boarding area had been without a shelter because it's located on a hill with very narrow sidewalks. Bus stop improvements were incorporated into the redevelopment of St. Paul newspaper's former headquarters were incorporated into the redevelopment plan of the St. Paul former headquarters that's becoming 150 apartments for low and middle income earners. And then there will be new and replacement shelters installed at 6 other downtown St. Paul locations through 2022. So it's an important project for us. I'll also mention the hearing that we had at the House Transportation Finance Committee. I will say that there was a strong interest in bus investments, and the first time I will say was fairly specifically stated by both sides of the aisle. So that's really encouraging. There was strong interest in ABRT. They wanted uh, uh, they were interested in the costs of expanding the additional money needed for the D line and the E line and the B line. And I think most of you probably read the article in the Star and Tribune this weekend that also indicated there seems to be a coalition building around bus investment. And if we can't be optimistic about that now, when can we be optimistic about it? But it's going to take a lot of work. And I think, though, that we have a strong chance of building a momentum around bus investment and ABRT investment, which is going to be critical for the future of transit in this region. So with that, that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Anybody have any questions? Councilmember Commerce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo the comments that that Wes just mentioned about that particular bus shelter on Fifth Street, because that was a kind of a long-term effort that involved multiple divisions of the council, and I just want to say thank you in particular, not only to the general manager, but also to Marilyn Porter and Barry Farrington, who I know have been involved directly in that process and bringing together some different threads to make that happen. Not only is the grade challenging there, it's a fairly steep hill, but also there was flexibility required in terms of the width of the stop. And that is in some way going to improve the lives of dozens of people who use that stop every single day. So I was incredibly happy to get the email that was moving forward on the time frame. So thank you for raising that.
Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, Wes, last Thursday, Chair Slowick, Councilmember Reynoso, and myself helped homeless advocates do a count on our trains. And I would encourage all public officials to do what we did, seeing the homeless, talking with them, meeting with them, hearing their stories. This is a human tragedy. But our hope is to use the count to get $15 million from the legislature. The reason that the unsheltered are riding our trains is because there aren't enough beds in the shelters. We have churches, synagogues, and mosques that have warm, safe spaces, but what they don't have is the staff or the security or the resources. So in the short term, we need more shelter beds because our trains have become the de facto shelters. What we observed is that there is a huge rush for the homeless to get on our trains starting at about 2 in the morning. And the trains tend to get filthy and violent. There are a lot of predators who rob and rape the homeless, and they come on our trains as well. My heart went out to the homeless, but I was also thinking about the third shift janitor, the bartender who would normally board at 2 in the morning. I did not see them on our trains because our trains no longer feel like a safe place for our regular customers. So I think there's a real urgency to have more shelter beds so that our trains don't become the de facto shelters.
Councilmember McCarthy.
In response to that, Councilmember Munt, in the same House committee meeting that both Nick and Wes were in, they did also bring up that issue and realized that there has to be some kind of partnership, with many different groups and organizations, and not just for Metro Transit. We are not capable of taking of fixing that travesty of that problem. But there was also interest too with safety. And I just want to emphasize it wasn't just a strong interest in BRT lines, but it was an overwhelming almost consensus among the members of that committee to do more with BRT.
Okay. Any other comments? Just Councilmember Mutt, thank you so much for going out and doing that. I think that's really good, and bringing that feedback here, I think it's much appreciated. So thank you very much, and just welcome to the committee, General Manager. All right, next we will move on to the consent agenda. There are 2 items on consent. Anyone care to make a motion to approve the consent
Move
agenda?
approval.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the consent agenda passes. We're on to non-consent items. Our first item tonight is item 2019-1, Metro Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit Master Funding Agreement, and we have Chris Beckwith. Welcome to the
Madam
committee.
Chair, committee members. My name is Chris Beckwith. I'm the project manager for the Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit Project, and I am here to present business item 2019-1 to you. This is for the regional administrator to negotiate and execute master funding agreements with 4 of our 5 cities and both counties along the Gold Line. The Gold Line serves 5 cities directly. That's St. Paul, Maplewood, Landfall, Oakdale, and Woodbury. But actually the Gold Line does not go through Landfall. It is through Oakdale in that section. So Landfall actually won't have any construction directly inside their city limits. And then Ramsey and Washington counties. So much like the other transitway projects before us, so Southwest, the Blue Line extension, the Green Line, and I think the original Hiawatha also used an MFA, a Master Funding Agreement, and Subordinate Funding Agreement approach. So the Master Funding Agreement is a zero-cost agreement. It just establishes the framework by which we will transfer funds between us and the cities or us and the counties. So there'll be 6 different agreements, 6 different master funding agreements, and then multiple SFA, subordinate funding agreements, under each of those master funding agreements. So some of the work we might transfer funds for would be for if the city wants to construct a sidewalk with local funding, they want to pay our engineers in the project office to design that and then pay the capital costs to construct it. That might be an example of funds coming to the project. If we would like to hire an inspector from a city or a county to inspect the Gold Line work when we are in construction, that might be an example of funds going the other way. So I think that's about it. Again, they're no cost, and I guess I'll entertain any questions.
Any questions for the presenter? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and motion carries. Thank you very much. Our next item tonight is item 2019-5, approval of the Orange Line BRT Small Starts Grant Agreement. And we have Christina Morrison. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Christina Morrison. I am the project manager for Metro Orange Line BRT. The proposed action tonight is that the Met Council approve the Orange Line Small Starts Grant Agreement in the amount of $74,078,782. As Mr. Thompson noted, the FTA is back in the office today after being impacted by the shutdown. We spoke with them this afternoon, and they, like us, are eager to move this forward, to route it through to execution. This will be a single-year grant agreement of FY18 funds, and these funds will be authorized through the capital budget or capital program through the upcoming 2019 carry forward amendment. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for the presenter? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move it.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Thank you. All right, next we are on to item 2019-8, which is a revised business item from our last meeting. It's ratification of emergency declaration to increase the TX-based purchase order 242477. We have Chris Hafner here.
Good afternoon, Chair, Committee. Just in case you were wondering, Metro Transit has a new policy for the Transportation Committee, only Chris's. Chris Beckwith and Christina Morrison and myself. But I'm back because, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, in 2018, we needed to purchase more LRV tires. Last time we had purchased them was in 2014. Our usage had doubled in 2018, and the lead time had tripled, unbeknownst to us. And as a result of that, our our original purchase order of 64 tires. It was deemed that it was necessary to double that to 128 tires. Otherwise, we wouldn't have tires in the summer of this summer. We still had that emergency ratification, or that emergency declaration was approved by Mr. Kuster at the time. But then we were running a parallel event at the same time. Basically what happened is Ryan Mateague, the director of LRB maintenance, had reached out to Siemens Production to ask them if they could get us any tires faster, because we were going to have a projected shortfall in March and April because they couldn't get us the tires we were purchasing until the end of March or beginning of April. Siemens didn't get back to Ryan McTeague until actually the day after your committee met last time, and they said that we can give you 120 tires, ship them from Germany, guarantee they'll be here March 1st, but you have to give us an answer in 2 days. So the Metro Transit Executive Group met with procurement. Everybody endorsed the idea of modifying the emergency declaration so that we purchased the 120 tires on top of the extra 64 from Siemens, and that was approved again. And I am asking for the Transportation Committee to once again endorse the ratification of the emergency declaration. And I will stand for any questions.
Any questions for the presenter? All right, not an entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move adoption, Madam Chair.
Anyone to second?
Second.
Any discussion? Just a quick comment. I'd like to commend staff for kind of following up and digging in on this, because this is a really good news and gets us the tires that we need sooner. So with that, and call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. And the motion passes. Thank you. All right. Next, we're on to item 2019-26. This item is review of Metropolitan Airports Commission 2019 through 2025 Capital Improvement Program. We have Russ Owens to present. We also do have someone here to, a citizen, to speak on the matter. And what we're going to do is have Russ present the business item and run through everything, and then allow the person up to speak. And then we will have our discussion. Welcome.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair and Council members. I'm Russ Owen with MTS. I'll be going over the review of the MAC 2019-2025 Capital Improvement Plan program. This is an annual process, and the MAC CIP has been previously reviewed by TAC and TAB. Maybe. Hey, stand out. Should we have to go over here? There we go. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
All right, Jenna.
Okay, sorry about that. So just as a reminder, state statute describes the Metropolitan Airports Commission roles as to promote aviation and competitive air service, to own and operate 7 public airports in the metropolitan area, to prepare long-term comprehensive plans, and to annually prepare a capital improvement program to implement the planned improvements at their projects. And the Met Council has aviation planning roles as well, defined by the state statute. And some of these are to, some of the council's roles have been tasked to provide a regional aviation system plan, which is part of the transportation policy plan. The legislation also requires the council to review both community and MAC projects for consistency with land use, airspace use, and planning policies, and also allows the Met Council to review the MAC CIP on an annual basis. So the legislative requirements to review the CIP are as follows. To see if the MAC has a public participation process, and the MAC held a public hearing in November. The council also reviews and comments on all the projects. This is normally handled through the TAC-TAB planning process, the Transportation Committee, and then finally the Met Council. There's some other legislative requirements that are in the CIP review, and those are basically to approve projects that meet both a significant effect criteria and also financial threshold of the dollar amount of the airport or of the project at the airport. The financial criteria is $5 million projects at MSP and $2 million projects at reliever airports. And the significant effects criteria are a new airport, location of a new airport, new runway at an existing airport, a runway extension at an existing airport, new or expanded passenger handling or parking facilities that are 25% or more capacity increase, and land acquisition. So if a project in the CIP meets both the financial threshold and the significant effects criteria, then the Met Council will have to approve that project. So the 2019 findings of the MAC 2019-2025 CIP. The MAC has followed a formal publication process for many years. This process includes public hearings, public information workshops, sending out notices to affected communities. An affected community is any community that shares a border with a MAC-owned airport. If the community believes that they are affected by an airport but don't share a border, they can submit a request to MAC to be included as an affected community. The MAC also prepares an AOEE, which is a document that provides an assessment of environmental effects of the projects for the CIP at each airport. The MAC is required under state statute to examine the cumulative environmental effects at each airport of the projects that the airport is considered at, or the projects are considered at. The AOE is currently in the process of final review, and the Met Council has reviewed the draft copies. The CIP funding for projects mostly consists of passenger facility charges, federal and state grants, MAC funds, and general aviation revenue bonds. And then consistency with the TPP under the Transportation System Stewardship and Strategy A2. Their airport sponsors should operate with a long-term financial plan that stresses maximizing non-regional funding sources to minimize financial impacts. There is one project that does meet both the significant effects criteria as well as the financial threshold, and that's the Lake Elmo Airport Runway Relocation Project. The MAC wants to move forward with the construction of runway 1432, relocation extension. This is a preferred alternative that was selected in the 2016 long-term comp plan. This is the project itself right now. On the left is the existing conditions. On the right is the preferred alternative in the long-term comp plan. The first phase of this program is scheduled for 2019 and is planned to be phased over 3 years. If the project is approved by the council, the approval will last the term of the project, and we'll come back to the council if there are significant changes in the project or the dollar amount of the cost of the project. There are many projects in the CIP that are in the out years, and those projects are mainly demand-driven projects. These projects will be initiated when the demand is such that projects to begin to accommodate capacity and growth at the airport. This is the one project that needs to be reviewed and approved. And with that, I can stand for any questions.
Councilmember McCarthy.
Madam Chair, how much public interest was with that Lake Elmo project?
Chair and council members, there were some. There was a community around the airport that has been opposing the project due to various reasons. I believe they're going to speak. We also do have the Director of Development, Bridget Reef, who's here too to answer any questions with the MAC. But there has been some opposition, and I think there's some interest both for and against in the area for the project.
Councilmember Reynoso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Russ, this has been an ongoing conversation that's been taking place for the last couple of years, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Chair and Councilmember, yes. So the long-term comp plan was completed in 2016.
Right.
So this project has been on the books, or been in that plan for the last 2 to 3 years. The MAC has gone through the environmental documentation process and is now at the point time to where they want to move the project forward with planning and construction. I believe that the MAC has had multiple meetings with folks out there, both for and against the project. And I don't know if Bridget wants to speak any more on that, but this project has been around for a while.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, then we will have, we've got Dave Schultz from the West Lakeland. He's the West Lakeland Township Supervisor. Come forward and welcome to the committee. If you could limit your comments to about 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it.
Madam Chair, members, thank you. I read a statement at the December 19th Transportation Advisory Board meeting, and you should have access to those that statement. I wish to add some and reinforce some comments to that statement. Regarding 30th Street, it is shown on 1939 maps and aerial photographs well before MAC purchased the property on the north side of 30th in 1949. MAC then took 40 acres by eminent domain in the early 70s on the south side, which is approximately the half of the length of 30th Street. Moving 30th Street is predicated on the townships relinquishing their prescriptive right-of-way. MAC does not own 30th Street. 30th Street is a municipal boundary, and MAC does not have the authority to move a municipal boundary. While Baytown on the north side of 30th has stated they would consider a move of 30th Street boundary for the purpose of continued shared road maintenance, this is forced annexation on the part of MAC, which they do not have that authority. Furthermore, why would a township want a road that is routed through a 100-year floodplain, runs alongside a designated DNR wetland, and according to the drawings that township has been furnished by MAC, the township engineer states does not meet MnDOT design standards. This expansion plan has changed over the years since 1965, and if MAC was serious about expanding it way back then, they should have done what is called land banking as recommended by the FAA regarding the MnDOT aviation safety zones. In fact, noticeably absent in today's presentation are those MnDOT aviation safety zones, which MAC has told the Met Council numerous times that they would implement going back 30 plus years. We would ask the Transportation Committee, and along with the full Met Council, to address our comp plans as well as the comp plans from the surrounding communities that were approved by the Met Council. Those comp plans all state no airport expansion. When Lake Elmo objected to the Gateway Corridor Bus Rapid Transit line, the route was changed to accommodate them. So we ask why you continue to move the MAC plan forward, which is contradictory to our plans and your approval of those plans. Per a MnDOT aviation presentation, MAC is required, and I quote, protect the people and property in the vicinity of the airport. Per an FAA email, as of January 2019, the number of aircraft at Lake Elmo is down 20% from last year at this time to almost to 163 aircraft. And in 2020, all aircraft at Lake Elmo will be required to install transponders in every aircraft, costing between $2,500 and $5,000 each. This will most likely contribute to a further reduction in the number of aircraft based at Lake Elmo. It was also stated in the FAA email that MAC has the option to, and I quote, the minimum requirement for the airport would be to rebuild the existing runway due to its aging pavement. Key word here is existing. While we fully understand the purpose and need of reliever airports within the metro area, MAC is not the only provider. It should be noted that there are 3 other airports within 16 miles of Lake Elmo, all which serve 100% of the aircraft of the 12,500-pound category. Lake Elmo currently meets the needs of 98% of the based aircraft there. Again, we ask you to please review all the facts from an unbiased and independent source before you vote and approve this plan and funding for the project. It is our understanding that the interpretation and moving this forward will create new precedents and will likely require legislative action to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz, for your comments. Just a comment to the committee. This action we take today would move this on to full council. We do have set up a meeting, additional meeting with some of our council staff and transportation folks and with people from Westlake Township. I don't know if you. Yep. Yeah. Okay. So, and that will happen before the council vote. So, with that, is there any other questions or comments for the presenter? All right, then I would look for a motion to approve.
Motion, Madam Chair.
Is there a second? Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Owens. All right, next we are on to item 2019-27. It is the 2018 Regional Solicitation Funding Decision. We have Steve Peterson. Pardon me.
Madam Chair, may I just,
Councilmember
so this will not be going to the full council this week or?
No, it is not a same
okay,
week
so
item. So there is time for meetings and discussions.
With
and
the community?
We want also a council member who represents that district, Councilmember Melander. We're coordinating to make sure that you get that meeting. Welcome to the committee.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So today we're talking about the regional solicitation. Mr. Dugan did a nice job of talking about the TAB meeting and respectfully left out 95% of the meeting, which was the bulk of the regional solicitation.
I'm no fool.
All the tough stuff. So today we want to go over what happened at TAB and then request an action of you. So at TAB, on the 16th, $200 million in the regional solicitation of the federal transportation funds was approved, and this did include around 10% over programming. So we programmed a little bit more money than was available, knowing that some level of projects do fall out in the 4 to 5 years from now until they're delivered. So today's action is to request your concurrence on the project list and to include that into the draft TIP, Transportation Improvement Program. So again, that comes as a draft to this committee in the June timeframe, and you've seen it every year. It comes back in the September timeframe as a final approval of all the federally funded projects throughout the region. So on to the details. The regional solicitation list includes 57 projects, including 2 what we call unique projects. One of those was highly contested and discussed St. Paul's electric vehicle charging stations and car sharing vehicles. And we have a slide just on that. And then also Met Council's regional travel model and travel behavior inventory. Additional funding for that. So one of the things that TAB discusses is how much money goes to the different modal groups. So roadways versus transit versus bicycle and pedestrian type projects. Again, we have 10 categories. So looking back to 2003 is how we came up with the base plus funding scenario, which was what was approved in the end. And those are based on how we've split up the money in the past. And so we were looking for, these are rough targets. We were looking at the 58%, the second row, 27% for transit, and 15% for bicycle and pedestrian. And so with some of the adjustments that came through and were approved by TAB, we were pretty close to hitting those targets. And we've shown what the end result was, circled in red. So maybe stepping back, maybe more importantly to this committee is how do the projects that are selected, how do they meet the needs that come out of Thrive and TPP? So we put together a chart here to show how the TPP goals and Thrive get into the regional solicitation criteria, and that gets into the measures. And so in the end, we're picking projects that you can always tie back to a lot of the goals that we've set forth for the region. Again, here's the 10 application categories that we did solicit projects from. And the scoring process is quite intense. Mr. Dugan attended most of those scoring committee meetings, in fact. And we brought in this gives a little credence to the process. We brought in over 60 technical experts from across the region, different agencies to score the projects. Gloria, I see a picture of you. In fact, right there, Gloria was one of our scorers. She's pictured here. She's one of the equity measure scorers to help us out there. But very technical, driven process, open, transparent. People have an opportunity to review their scores, dispute those if they see something that's at fault. But that's the process that we've laid forth. Pretty good process. So as far as what was funded, 57 projects. So again, we were less than half of the requests were funded in either projects or dollar values. But this funding of $200 million does leverage another $207 million. So projects going out on the street, you'll see over $400 million worth of transportation investment. But the last bullet point is also the unmet demand. If we were to fund all of those, if we had more money available, we could have almost doubled our total investment in transportation. So it shows the kind of need that's out there and all the various modes we have for transportation funding. Another topic of discussion was where are the projects located between the various parts of the region. And we're happy to say that out of these 57 projects, there's going to be investment in all 7 counties, and 37 different cities or townships will receive some level of investment through these projects, which is quite remarkable when you think about the way our region is laid out and the population centers and such. So 37 different cities and townships. So I wanted to note that. We are in the midst of producing district or maps by council district. This is one of Madam Chair, your district, District 4, of where those projects are located, and we will distribute those to the rest of the committee by the end of this week, and so you can see the specific projects that you'll have in your respective districts. We wanted to spend a few minutes on, the projects are a little overwhelming, 57 different projects. We did put together, or the applicants actually put together one-pagers that came in the attachment. If you look through those, if you want more details on a specific project, the applicants were required to submit the one-pagers, and that's a nice addition this year. But on the roadway side, there was 17 roadway projects, 2 system management, which are more the signal timing projects, and 3 bridge projects. All of those have a very multimodal nature. In fact, the Gold Line, Blue Line extension, and E Line, arterial BRT, all those corridors will receive projects and benefits that will eventually benefit those transitway corridors. So that's one thing to note. One of those, the E Line, is on Hennepin Avenue. A lot of people have driven Hennepin Avenue between downtown and Lake Street. It's going to have a full reconstruction. This project awarded to the city of Minneapolis will be coupled with a Metro Transit $6 million award to build stations leading to an eventual arterial BRT, the E Line. That'll really transform that corridor in all different modes, not just for the roadway users, but bicycles and also pedestrians and transit users. Here's a project in Scott County, Highway 13 and near the ports of Savage. If you've been down there, it's very difficult. A lot of trucks, especially certain times of the year, difficult to make a turn on Highway 13 to get into the ports and the industrial areas there. So this project will provide a great separation to make it much safer and ease traffic in that general area getting into the ports of Savage. $26 million project in this, and we supplied about $6 million there, so some good local leverage on that. On the transit side, 10 transit projects, 5 travel demand management projects, and then ongoing funding. This is the base level funding for all the TMOs in the region, comes from this funding source. One of those projects was an MBTA project, the Orange Line Connector. So we'll time this to open up around the same time as Orange Line Phase 1. It's a local bus service in the city of Burnsville that ends at the Burnsville Transit Station. So this was a $2.7 million award to MBTA. Then lastly, on the bicycle pedestrian side, which is the most competitive category, 11 multi-use trails, 2 pedestrian projects, and 4 safe routes to school projects. One we wanted to highlight was down in Apple Valley. Very localized project, but you can see it made a big difference. This is a 4-lane roadway, busy roadways. This is a crossing to an elementary school. where they're going to install what they call a hawk signal. So it'll make it safer to cross mid-block where there isn't a traffic signal for the elementary students to cross this 4-lane roadway. So talking to the mayor of Apple Valley, this is a small project, you know, in dollar value, but certainly is going to mean a lot to that community once it's constructed. Back to the unique project, the City of St. Paul. Again, this is a $4 million is what TAB had approved going to that project. That's going to be coupled with a $4 million Xcel Energy grant for the charging station. So it's 70 mobility hubs near our transit stations in St. Paul and Minneapolis, and then 50 car sharing vehicles administered through Our Car. So this is really helps implement that Twin Cities shared mobility action plan that a lot of people had worked on, including former Councilmember Rodriguez and others. So this is one step to implementing that plan. Also did want to mention the Highway Safety Improvement Program. And these are smaller grants, so $25 million for 25 projects, so about $1 million a project. These are targeted at fatalities and serious injury type crashes and preventing those. Mr. Dugan did mention some of these projects in his presentation. And so when we give you the maps by council district, it also include the highway safety improvement projects, and the map of those is shown here. So again, spread throughout the region quite nicely, and a lot of investments throughout the region. So today's action is to again request concurrence on the list of projects and to include those into the draft tip that we're currently working on with MnDOT and other agency partners. And the work on the solicitation really is a 2-year process. You saw, let's see, Councilmember or Chair Hovland and some of the others applauding at the end of the meeting because it's a 2-year process. So we agreed to 34 members agreed to something, so that was worth an applause. That every 2 years at least, and so I think people were pretty pleased at the end of the TAB meeting after a lot of good discussion and compromise took place. And we'll begin the next cycle. One of the best things is we're always making the process better, so we're already gearing up for the 2020 regional solicitation from a staff level, working with some of our partners there. So, Madam Chair, with any questions, again, this is an action item. We put these request staff to put these into the draft tip.
Questions or comments? Councilmember Mudd.
Madam Chair, Mr. Peterson, it was delightful to watch TAB and Democracy in Action as they arrived at the Base Plus scenario. There was a lot of give and take, and I think what we ended up with was a strong multimodal package that provides something for all parts of the region. So with that, if there are no questions, I would move the item.
I will second.
Very good. I know before we move to vote, I know Mr. Dugan wanted to comment about.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Members, with leave of the committee and the chair, I'm not a member of the committee, so I'm not technically allowed to speak, but I've asked the chair for a minute. It's never stopped me before, though. I wanted to, hats off to Director Thompson and Deputy Director Benowitz. This was a really impressive solicitation, really impressive process. And as Steve said, I attended just about every meeting that there was. I'm always in a slow reading group in school, but anyway. But the team of Steve and Joe Barbeau and Elaine Kousoukalis, and Elaine is, she's the institutional memory, and Steve, I can honestly say, has forgotten more about regional solicitation than most of us will ever know. And they did things like turn around the funding scenarios from 5 to 2 over a weekend, so we could meet on, Nick, was it a Thursday, and then we met on a Monday, I think it was. And I mean, it just did an outstanding job, and it really should be recognized for that. The only negative in the whole thing was in this presentation, there's this photos, and I'm not in any of them. And I spent the entire afternoon in the green room. So thank you, Madam Chair.
With that, we've got a motion and a second. Are there any other comments or questions or discussion? Councilmember McCarthy.
Madam Chair, Steve, you said we will all get our individual maps of our area. I'm actually interested in, all the other council members too, not just my own. So if that's possible.
Sure.
I would, okay.
Do that.
Any other comments or questions? All right. With that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And passes. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. All right, we're on to, well, we have to decide what goes on consent. I think items 1 and 3 can go on consent, and 2, 4, and 5 should go to the full council. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments? Can we do that? Number 1? Yep. 1 and 3.
Just 1 and 3 going consent.
I think so. This is good news. That has questions.
So all
That
of
should
them.
go.
Yes,
Agree? All right. All right, very good. All right, with that, we'll move on to information items. And today we have Gloria Jeff and Amy Venowitz here to talk about rethinking the I-94 project.
Madam Chair and members, I'm just here today to introduce to you Gloria Jeff, who serves as MnDOT's project director for the Rethinking I-94 project. And today, Gloria will be sharing with you the results of phase 1 of the study, which just completed this summer, and she's now moving on to phase 2. So Gloria came to Minnesota last year, about halfway through phase 1, and she's been enjoying our balmy, warm weather ever since. But I wanted to share with you a little bit about her distinguished background, because she's been a lot of places in transportation. So Gloria has been at the MPO level with the Wichita area MPO. She has been at the city level serving as the general manager of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. She's been at the federal level serving as a deputy administrator and associate administrator for policy under the Clinton administration. And at the state level, she served as both the planning director and department director for the Michigan Department of Transportation. So she's been at every level of government, and now she's here in Minnesota freezing her butt off. And we're very, very happy to have her here leading this project for us, and hopefully she'll make it all the way to the end in the next couple of years. So here's Gloria.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson and council members. It is indeed my pleasure to be here. I am always excited to talk about this project because I think it bodes well for the future of transportation in establishing the fact that we can have a vision in which we not only make sure that we make concrete, asphalt, and steel important, that the communities that it serves get benefit not only from the ability to quickly move from point A to point B, but also to reap the benefits that transportation provides that are economic, that are social, that are health maintained. I'd also like to introduce one of my colleagues, Brenda Thomas, who will be here to chat with you as well about some of the exciting engagement activities that we had going on here. The study area that's involved here extends from Trunk Highway 61 all the way over to West Broadway. It's about 15 miles in length. And I say that just to sort of set it in some context. But we don't begin with the story of here are the things that we cared about, but to start the story by talking about why we are where we are. And that means talking a little bit about the initiative itself. Back in 1962, the two cities were not connected by a high-level interstate roadway in terms of the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. And so one of the things that happened in 1962 was with the advent of the Highway Trust Fund, there were now federal funds available to connect places of consumption with places of production. And so it became an opportunity to connect the two economic and political hubs within the state of Minnesota together. But in so doing, there were some other non-transportation related objectives. One had to do with the perception of the state legislature that we needed to fulfill the dream of connecting the Capitol grounds to the Mississippi River and to the cathedral. In some other instances, it was to make sure that we continued to bridge the mighty Mississippi. And in other instances, it was to make sure that we had access to the wonderful institutions of higher education along that 15-mile segment. But in so doing, there were some folks that were harmed. But again, it was 1962, and we were doing state-of-the-art for 1962. We learned to do better as time passed on. It's for those of you who have children like mine, when they were 9, I didn't think they were going to live to be 10. Today they are in their 30s and 40s because they learned and got better. And we too, in the highway construction business, got better. And so the challenge was placed before us in 2016 by Commissioner Charles Zelli to do different, to do better. He began with an apology to the residents of Rondo that was a very viable community that if you looked at this slide, you can see we're like the Borg that came in and just scooped out the middle of it. If you're not a Trekkie, don't worry about not understanding the reference. But in essence, the picture speaks for itself. It introduced an element of mistrust for the then Minnesota Highway Department. We are working hard now to overcome it, and thus the new approach. We are looking as part of the rethinking effort to have a community-based system, one where we are able to not just inform the community about what we're going to do to them, but to get their input, to understand why they're there, to understand why and how they use transportation, and hopefully to have them be a part of how we identify solutions, because we do have some issues around concrete, asphalt, and steel, but we also have some issues about how does the community have a sense of place, which gets us to our second objective, which has to do with making it easier to move, not only along the corridor of this 15 miles, but across it. While we have we have in excess of 150,000 vehicles a day moving along the freeway, we have almost that many vehicles crossing the freeway. And it's not just single occupant vehicles, but also trucks and other delivery vehicles that are also along with pedestrians and cyclists. And so we need to do a better job. And then finally, the third thing we wanted to do was to make sure that it's safe. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great our connection is with the people. If it's not safe, we haven't done our job. We also wanted to make sure that we were able to, and forgive me, I have injured my eyes, and so I'm using glasses as opposed to my normal contacts, and longevity has its rewards. It also has its opportunities. So we began the process by beginning an engagement, and it's a real engagement. We wanted to understand what people wanted from transportation, why they wanted it, why they were where they were. I mean, it's interesting. We never think about why do people live where they live, and how does that evolve over the time period. We also, hello? What did we do here? Okay, we'll go back to that one. We also wanted to make sure that we understood what was the current condition of concrete, asphalt, and steel. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, but I'm sure that all of you know that 55 years is not the life expectancy of concrete when it's handling 150,000 vehicles a day. And we have some 55-year-old pavement out there. We also wanted to develop some ideas in that we know how to design roadways to be safe, but how are they actually safe for pedestrians, for cyclists? As we look at more than a growing population of more than the 40-foot long, 80,000-pound freight vehicles, freight today is driven by that little personal digital device that you carry around in your hand. How many of us have ordered food, clothing, something off of that? And it isn't a 40-foot long, 80,000-pound delivery vehicle that brings it, but we're doing freight. And so we're seeing tremendous growth in freight, so we have to think about safety in different ways. Because while we don't have, like I said, the 40-foot long, 80,000-pound trucks motoring along our residential streets, we suddenly have a tremendous influx of those panel delivery trucks as we wait for our FedEx, UPS, and U.S. Postal Service deliveries anxiously. It's like Christmas every day for some of us. So let me tell you a little bit about the corridor from the standpoint of what's there. We have some 23 different neighborhoods along this 15 miles. We have some 54 parks or green spaces, and that begins to make a difference in terms of where people are trying to get to and why. And we also have some 7 libraries, places of learning, places of information, as well as the other items you see up here. But again, that doesn't tell us the complete story. We have some 2 million transit users along the routes that operate on the corridor. There are actually more that are impacted if we begin to include the individuals along the University line and those that cross it in terms of the new bus rapid transit service that operates along Snelling Avenue. So 2 million transit users is not just a drop in the bucket. As I mentioned earlier, we've got some 150,000 vehicles operating along the roadway on a daily basis, and we also have some 8,000 40-foot long, 80,000 pound trucks operating as well. And that number, while it may not grow a whole lot, those panel trucks are coming to get us. USDOT is predicting an almost doubling in the amount of freight moved between now and the year 2040. And then finally, let's talk about the concrete, asphalt, and steel as a good engineer I'm supposed to lead with. We have some 80 plus lane miles of pavement out there. We have over 2,100 drainage structures when you want to get down to the nitty gritty. And then we also have some 27 noise walls, which all begin to deal with how do we interact with people. Those noise walls are not there because we care about concrete, asphalt, and steel, but because we care about the impact on human beings. I'd now like to introduce my colleague, Brenda Thomas, who serves as our strategic marketing and engagement director for the effort, and she's going to talk to you about the exciting aspects of our engagement effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. I'm really privileged to be here today to share with you the engagement work that we've done for the past 2.5 years. I came to MnDOT specifically for this project, and I have a high interest in engaging with the communities. And therefore, today, going into this project, is unlike any other that MnDOT has done to begin to do engagement earlier in the process. So as you look at this, we really wanted to propose an engagement approach that really involves the community every step of the way. And the circles on here indicate all the phases of MnDOT that we go through. And so how do we engage with the communities along this process and being able to adapt to what we're going to be doing as well. So our goals for this is really about 3 words: early, often, and more. So we want to engage with the communities earlier in the process, even before we actually had funding identified for the projects. Often, so continuously, and not just when we're going to be out there digging up the yards and the roads, and then more. So there's a lot of underrepresented communities along this corridor, and we really wanted to make sure that we're hearing all voices and not just those that we usually hear from on a day-to-day basis. One of the items that I love to point out most about this project is what we're called the cultural mapping and historical overviews. Before we can even dig into engagement, we really need to understand who actually lives here and how they came to be. So you can see that along this corridor, we really have 6 primary communities that live along this complex corridor. And what we did was break down each one of these communities by how they came to Minnesota, when did they come, why did they come, why are they still there, how has their engagement been since they came to Minnesota, and then how do they want to be engaged moving forward. So before we can even create those engagement strategies, really understanding how can we really engage with the communities that live and work and gather in our space. And so we have this in a wonderful report along with all the other details. Additionally, we refer to this corridor also as by zones. If I look at a 15-mile stretch as an engagement communications person, that's quite a bit of information to try to wrap my head around. So what we did from early in the stages was actually break the 15 miles into 6 zones, and those were based upon a few different things. One of them, potential projects that might be coming up in the future, as well as geographic and demographic locations as well. But within each one of these zones, it began to formulate a lot of the information that we gathered. And we can look at it in the same sense, in the same way, and being able to pull the information. So in the zone profiles book that we have, it really gets into who lives there in terms of more names and groups and organizations and their demographics in that area and how they use I-94 and how and where to engage people. So that this piece of information can really help establish a foundation in building engagement plans. And of course,
we don't just use this alone. So you put this together with your comprehensive and small area plans and other reports, and of course that local knowledge and expertise as well when you're developing the plans. One of the great things about the things that we gather during this phase is what we're titled just the Community Comments Database. So we've talked to over 2,000 people in one-on-one settings, small group listening sessions, many events. We hosted workshops as well within the community, and every single comment and thing we were asking, we asked it consistently throughout the entire engagement process. We wanted to know how they felt about I-94, what their values are, how do they vision it, what's their experience with it, what can we do better, and the why. And so what we did was take all of this information and compile it into an easy little access database that one of our grad engineers put together for us. But more than just putting it in there, we did it by location, we themed it out, we put the affiliations. So many times we're out in the community and we don't own whatever street or city or sidewalk they might be talking about, but we have valued stakeholders that do and value that information. So now we're able to pull all of those details, and I can pull it by very specific crossings and details and be able to provide that to other project teams or the city or county, and it can help inform some of their decisions as well. One of my most favorite piece of the engagement work that we did, and it was very unique to MnDOT, is what's called the segmentation survey. So we really wanted to gain the understanding of attitudes and desires of the people that live along the corridor and how that impacts their decisions and how they feel about what MnDOT is doing or what MnDOT owns as well. I have to say that, of course, I feel for our consultant that was doing the actual phone calls, and people were asking, why does MnDOT care? What do I value? And if I give to charity or not? But really it was about understanding what they value and how can we tie that to what they in response would be in response to. So I want to just pull out these two market segments that happen to be along the 15-mile stretch. And one of them being like the active contributors, and most along this 15-mile stretch, they were mostly white, higher income. They contribute to charities. They feel everyone has an opportunity to be involved in local community decisions. And what that does is that ties to what they were concerned about most: more traffic lanes, better maintenance, better traffic flow, wider roads or lanes. On the other side, we have the informed observers, and again, those are mostly men, boomers, students. No, the education was varied in there, and they felt that everyone should stay informed of community, local, and state news, and they should provide input to local reps when asked. I think that's a key word to point out, when asked. They are mostly concerned about, again, traffic lanes and flow, better maintenance, safe ramps, and better access and noise. What we can do is really take this information, we can pinpoint down into what zone within the actual corridor. We then can see who's living there, how are they responding, how do they want to be engaged with, and then from that is how we build our community engagement plan. So that is, again, the whole point of being able to pull this information and get this background information and details as well. Two last quick slides before I turn it over to Gloria again are what we call guiding commitments for project teams. So what we heard, we wanted to develop these commitments that came directly from the people of what they expect from MnDOT. So what do communities expect from MnDOT? And they were vision, co-power, authenticity, respect, transparency, and inclusivity. And we provided a handout to you as well so you can get more in depth and detailed of what those actually mean. Additionally, we wanted to hear from them, or what we learned from them, I should say, is that what people expect from the actual project work. So what they expect from MnDOT versus what they expect from project work is obviously different. So the project work, they obviously cared about the health and environment, gentrification, their safety, equity, trust, things of that nature. So our job now is how do we, as we move into our next phase, how do we ensure that we are following these commitments and this livability framework, and how MnDOT is making a decision and how we're including the community as we move forward. So with that, Madam Chair and Council members, I'll turn it back over to Gloria.
Thank you. We've been whipping through here, and So we've just given you the highlights. There's much more in-depth, in particular, for example, on the survey work, who we talk to, how we talk to them. If you go onto our website, there is what I call the version that tells you everything you wanted to know and were afraid to ask and didn't know you should ask about the project. That's a little over 1,000 pages long. There's an executive summary that is infinitely more readable, that is about 40 some odd pages long. And then there's what I call the Jonah Jean Finorki version, which is lots of pictures and images, but it's less than 20 pages in length, and it tells you at a very high level with lots of images what the message is that we're trying to communicate. So there's no deep dark secrets here. We just recognize that everybody isn't a transportation junkie who sits down and wants to read that 1,000-page report, or has the time or the disposition or is sleep deprived enough to want to do it. So let me take a couple minutes to very quickly sort of wrap up from the engineering perspective the things that we focused on. Like I said, we've got some 15 plus miles of roadway, some 80 plus miles of pavement. MnDOT has been engaged in, for lack of a better descriptor, a effort to patchwork the I-94 between the two downtowns because it's a massive undertaking. We can't do it as one massive project as much as people might think. Oh, it's no big deal. It's just 15 miles long. Yes, but it goes through the most populous area in the state of Minnesota. It has communities, attractions like the University of Minnesota, like Augsburg University, like, that Viking-shaped stadium you have in downtown Minneapolis. Little things like that don't do well with no access for extended periods of time. So we know that we've got to do some work on the pavement. We know that over the next 5 to 20 years, efforts have to be made. Bridges, we've got almost 80+% of our bridges in fair or satisfactory condition. That's a good thing, but that's of this snapshot. That doesn't talk about where they're going to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 or 20 years. So there's work to be done in looking at the bridges. As I said, overall, our assets are in need of updating just from a technology standpoint, also from a condition standpoint. And so a big component of what we do here in looking at and developing a range of alternatives is how do we address those. We heard tremendous things in the engagement component that are not related to concrete, asphalt, and steel that we're also going to try and address. In addition, we took a look at the freight movements in the area, and in that regard, we really got a snapshot of how freight moves. Again, in the same way that we identified the profiles, we did the same thing in looking at the freight movements, and so again, we had a sort of snapshot because all the areas aren't the same. The freight movements to the capital are very different from the freight movements around the university that are in themselves unique and separate from the freight movements once the new stadium is opened up at Snelling and I-94. Moving quickly through this. We also wanted to focus on this additional issue around the danger of not being able to see, of safety. One of the things about this particular corridor that is important to us is the fact that it has a average crash rate that's about twice that we find in the rest of the Twin Cities area, and for that matter, the state. Now, most of those are not fatal, but that has to do with the fact that there's about 4 hours of congestion a day, and so what we end up with are a lot of property damage kinds of crashes, as opposed to ones with serious injuries and fatalities, but nonetheless very troubling. And so we want to focus in our solutions on how to address them. The area around Trunk Highway 280, which is the entrance to the industrial area just to the north of I-94, we find ourselves with particular sets of challenges there with respect to safety. We also wanted to look at this from a multimodal perspective as well, and so we also took the opportunity to take a look at where there are opportunities for better crossings, not just for vehicles moving across the corridor, but also for pedestrians as well as cyclists. And what we found there is we did not identify specific actions because this is the pre-environmental analysis component. We began to get a dimensioning of what were the challenges and opportunity so that as we identify potential alternatives in the environmental component, this becomes an essential element. And you can see that there are some kinds of criteria that were involved. One of the important elements that I skipped over really quickly and didn't intend to was this issue of transit. And not only was Metro Council represented on our technical advisory committee, but also Metro Transit. And in that regard, there were some critical questions hanging out there around what to do with respect to transportation advantage that was on a temporary basis discontinued because of the I-35 bridge disaster. And we look forward to that discussion about how we include those in alternatives and what new and exciting opportunities it will present. We've looked at transit, we've looked at cycling and where there are opportunities for a potential facility, not only along the corridor, but one that connects within those communities along the corridor so that there's a continuity and a comprehensive system as opposed to just a wonderful opportunity along the roadway itself. And so finally, what we wanted to do was, as I skipped ahead to the transit component, is what did we learn? For one, it's an adaptive process. As a good engineer, I like absolutes. I go from point A to point B, I do these sets of operations, and voila, I have an answer. That's not the case here because it was an opportunity to do something that hasn't been done before. This challenge of how do we integrate a community into our transportation and the benefits to accrue to them, not just in terms of improved ability to get from point A to point B, but to leverage the transportation investment. So the process is adaptive. We learn, we try some things, it works really well, and we go, yay. Then we have some things that don't work real well, and we go, okay, how do we fix that next time? Again, my favorite analogy is it's the same as learning a new skill set. Sometimes you get it right away, and then there's sometimes when, okay, got to do it a little bit different. I'm going to get to the same outcome. I just can't get there the same way a majority of the people do. Probably the most critical piece that came out of this was an open acknowledgement that MnDOT is not simply the leader at all times. And we've got three roles that we have to focus on. There are ones where we have statutory responsibility and we take leadership. There are other instances where in order to deliver outcomes that matter to the people who live and use that corridor, whether they live in the neighborhoods immediately adjacent or go through those neighborhoods, we have to partner to make sure that solutions work for everybody and that we leverage opportunities, whether it's in improved housing, whether it's in providing green space as a result of actions that we take or that our local partners take. And then finally, the facilitation. As much as we don't like to think about it, there are times when MnDOT's the 800-pound gorilla. And sometimes the 800-pound gorilla does good by not because we have the authority to do anything, but because we're the 800-pound gorilla and we ask people to show up to a meeting who do have the ability to make those decisions and make those differences, they show up. And so we also can be a facilitator. And in that regard, that's probably the single most important thing that came out of this, is we know what people want, how they learn, and they said, we don't want you to just be in charge and tell us what you're going to do to us, but view us as partners, collaborators, and use your strength as an agency, your knowledge, to help us find solutions in areas that are not strictly the ones that we're accustomed to. That's phase one. We wrap that up in August of this year. We will move on. We've moved on to phase two, which is the environmental documentation component, so that we can begin the process of identifying purpose and need, identifying a potential range of solutions, and looking forward to being able to come down to a series of preferred solutions or a schedule or a program of projects. Because again, as I said, this is not a 5-year undertaking. If I were a gambling person, and this is just Gloria's estimation, this may take us 20 years to do it incomprehensively. And in order to do it right, to build on the engagement that we've had, to continue to make people part of the decision process, to engage them, it's going to take time to deliver all those projects. Some will get delivered quickly, some will have to be delivered over potentially a 20-year planning horizon. But we look forward to their being involved and being a part of that process. If you want to learn more about this project that you don't already know, we make it easy. Google Rethinking I-94, and we have a wonderful website that tells you everything you wanted to know, didn't know, you thought you needed to know, and like I said, it will surprise you.
Good job.
If you have any other questions, always feel free to contact me at the address included in your information. Madam Chair, we would love to take questions.
Thank you. I'm sure there will be some questions. I know Director Thompson wanted to make a comment real quick.
Madam Chair, members, we were excited to bring this to you tonight because it really is a total rethinking of how to do a highway project in the region. It highlights many things that align with where we're going with the TPP. We're in the phase of we need to reconstruct our interstate, and what MnDOT's approach and being a true partner on this, they've really rethought how you think about these mega projects, and it just aligns with everything in Thrive and their approach. And we're excited to bring this as an update to you because there'll be a lot invested in this corridor in the next several years, and it's just an important approach, and it's definitely a different approach to highway development and projects we've seen in the past. And I compliment them.
Any questions, comments? Councilmember Munn.
Madam Chair, first comments and then a question. I am so glad that you ladies are here. And Gloria, I'm thrilled to see an engineer with people skills. Back in the 1960s, I grew up in an apartment building at Franklin and I-94. So outside my bedroom window, I watched them build the freeway. And at the time, the engineers that were working on the project had come from the war, where they had slapped down airstrips in enemy territory. You didn't have to worry about the neighbors. And I think MnDOT will redefine itself by showing how road planning can connect people instead of dividing people. My question to you is I've talked to folks from Rondo and folks from Prospect Park who all think that they're going to get a lid over the new I-94. Are we going to do lids? Can we do lids? Are they prohibitively expensive?
There are several proposals out there about lids. The Capital Area Architecture and Planning Board, for example, is dreaming about a potential lid over the 35 I-94 interchange to, again, help realize the dream of connecting the Capital area, the Capital Park area, to the Cathedral, to the west, and to the Mississippi River. Again, it's at a dream stage. They haven't even done a feasibility study, so we wait to see where that goes. The folks at Rondo we meet with every 2 weeks, they are excited about the opportunity for reconnection of their community. They recognize that MnDOT has not and cannot make a commitment to fund that activity. So they have looked to and are looking to the philanthropic community to provide them with funding for a lid. We have not seen a formal or even had an informal conversation with the folks in Prospect Park. So my answer is, don't know. They're being talked about. We'll see what happens as we look at alternatives, as we see communities like Rondo move forward with their own separate proposals and plans for a lid.
Councilmember Reynoso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. And I agree with Councilmember Munt on personality. Love it. From the perspective, Gloria, you've mentioned several times freight, the impact of freight, specifically in the Twin Cities region, and how many bridges we have that are probably not adequately maintained or can adequately withstand more freight as it is now. As a former Angelino, I'm born and raised in Southern California. Nobody understands traffic until you've been on the 405 at 5 o'clock on a Friday evening. So traffic here in Minnesota.
When it rains, add that other qualifier.
Right. So nobody in Minnesota really understands how bad traffic is and here compared to there. So with that said, in Southern California, and actually all of California, you have freight that's confined to the first 2 lanes. I'm kind of curious what the long-term impact of not confining the freight, large freight trucks to those first two lanes, and what that impact is to the rest of the highway system. And whether that's something we need to rethink in Minnesota, whether that's the right way to go. You can think about the gust that goes by when a truck goes by, how it pushes vehicles, and the impact of that. There's a whole bunch of stuff, but on top of that, that's one comment. The other thing is the future of trucking with platooning and heavier trucks. How do you see that all fitting in with MnDOT on long-term impact to our roads and highways?
Well, let me attack the first one. While we do see tremendous opportunities for growth in freight traffic, I think it's fair to describe that our bridges today, some 80+% are in good condition, good or satisfactory condition. So we only have a relatively small proportion along this corridor that are in need of attention for openers. But back to the question of what do we do with them? Most of the long distance trucks are not using the I-94 corridor. They're actually going through the 694 corridor as a regional bypass. And that's where most of the traffic is going. What we are finding is that, tempting though it may be, and I'm leaving my comments to the I-94 corridor because I wouldn't begin to speak for all of MnDOT on issues around freight. I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be right all the time. So that's one piece of it is the heavier trucks, the long distance trucks are actually taking 494, 694, the bypass, and they're not really operating along the 94 corridor. Where we do see them operating along the 94 corridor, there are specific sets of destinations, and one of the breakdowns that we did within the freight component is to looking at how many of those trips were being originated or destined within the corridor. We have a pretty good handle on where that is and how it is. So as we begin to identify a range of alternatives, clearly how to address that truck movement will be a component of those alternatives. To your more fundamental question about platooning, platooning is actually a really good thing and it's in place today, but you won't see it in most urban environments because of the high frequency of interactions with automobiles. So where you do see platooning is in the more rural, low-density environments of the transportation system. There are examples of platooning where across the state of Colorado, they've actually operated platooned vehicles. There are any number of places along the existing interstate system, not in urban environments like the Twin Cities, where platooning is happening today. It's in part respond to the increased demand, and secondly, quite candidly, to the lack of availability of truck drivers.
Other questions? Councilmember McCarthy.
Madam Chair, I'm really interested and thankful at the engagement process that you put together in order to do this. We have, here at the Met Council, we've seen Metro Transit do the same thing at many different levels beyond what they used, beyond what was done before. And so you say that the segmentation survey is unique to MnDOT. So, but is it unique to the nation? Did other cities do this? And how successful were they, if you could just do that in a generalization? And then rather than going through the over 1,000 pages, I was just wondering how many responses did you get in the initial survey? Just because I imagine in those areas, there's not very many people with landlines. In some of the areas that there aren't very many people with landlines, and at what point you thought it was sufficient enough to, that you had sufficient information to go ahead and move forward with your engagement plan.
Madam Chair, Council members. So in regards to your first, oh no, I just forgot the first question. As from our knowledge, the unique to MnDOT and the market segmentation has not been done in other countries. Or other parts of the country. I was just at the Transportation Research Board National Conference and presenting there in several states and sharing the information with other several states about this work. And so to our knowledge, it has not been used to this degree. The consultant that came on board to do it actually are normal consultants for advertising in large corporations here in Minnesota, and that's the tactic they use to gain customers. So it was, in that sense, it was unique to MnDOT as far as a transportation-related engagement effort. And I'm sorry, your second question?
The number of people you surveyed.
Correct. Yeah, so there's several on there, and we have it, I do have it highlighted on here, but there were 2 separate baselines done, and those reached, I think it was like over a couple thousand people. The this market segmentation was a complete separate survey, and some of those surveys were online, on the phone, landline, cell line, in person. So they were multiple facets, and we specifically ensured we hit the demographic target as well. So extra efforts were done to make sure that it was well represented. So it was significant impact for what we've done. Could we do more? Absolutely. If there was more funding, I think there's always more to do. And hopefully as we move into phase 2, using the information we gathered, figuring out where the gaps are, and that's what then we'll target a little bit harder for our efforts to make sure we're hitting all the gaps.
And one last piece, no, you don't have to read the whole 1,000 pages. There's actually appendices that specifically pull out the market segmentation effort, so you can take a look at that as well.
And Madam Chair, Councilman, I'll offer, you can call me at any time and I can point you exactly to what you want. If you want something specific for a certain area, let me know.
Other questions? If not, I've got one. So I'm just curious how you're using this information, this combination of engineering and engagement on this very big project, because we know there'll be another big project down the road, to build kind of a blueprint for MnDOT as they look at these things in the future, because obviously you're learning a ton, but how are we going to apply that to these other projects, or what tools are you preparing as you're going along?
One of the rationales for this particular approach was it wasn't just for the I-94 corridor between the 2 downtowns. It was intended to establish some models for MnDOT in general and tools for MnDOT in general. One of the things that we quickly moved through was the toolkit. And the toolkit is intended not just for the project engineers along the I-94 corridor, but for all of MnDOT. As a matter of fact, we've already farmed it out to our colleagues in Ramsey County, and they're beginning to use aspects of it for a project that they're doing along Rice Street that intersects with the corridor. So we've got a teaching tool there. We've also done a training with project managers throughout MnDOT, not only the ones along the I-94 corridor in an effort. And as Brenda mentioned, we have been unabashedly chauvinist about this work and have used international forums like the Transportation Research Board, the Minnesota chapter of the American Planning Association. We have stood up in front of any number of marketing and engagement organizations to talk about this approach. Again, because it's an adaptive process, we know that the engagement components really do mean doing things differently. We have basic tools that we want folks to take a look at, but also recognize that they're going to have to then tailor them for their particular locations. We've got a building base for the entire 15-mile segment of I-94 that can be used by our partners here at the Metropolitan Council, can be used by the counties, that can be used by the cities to begin to address what we've learned. Because again, folks don't make the distinction between the Minnesota Department of Transportation and the Public Works Department in Ramsey County or in the city of Minneapolis. Y'all all from the government, and y'all need to take care of us. And yeah, that street isn't a state trunk highway, but I'm gonna complain to you about it anyway. And so we have the opportunity to have that kind of data collected and made available.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for anyone? Well, thank you very much. This is very interesting. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
With that, our business for the evening is concluded, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.